Yeah. So when we were talking about the game, you mentioned in episode 85 the game and a book, and I did not know the book, but there's several books called The Game.
Yeah, so the one specifically that I was referencing was, I think when it was originally released, it was just called The Game. I think that it's had a tagline added since then, which is penetrating the secret society of pickup artists. It's by Neil Strauss.
Okay.
Strauss.
Yeah.
So for those who are unfamiliar, it is literally just a person's firsthand account of learning how to pick up other people, and the sole purpose of the book is to try to explain how to pick up other people.
Like for dating, right?
Yes. Well, theoretically, it doesn't care about motive from the standpoint of the book. It cares about just getting someone to engage in conversation with you and then be willing to either leave whatever location with you or at least have prolonged interaction. Like it's literally, how do you attempt to pick up someone? And then what you do from that point is up to you.
Yeah, and so we talked about the alpha male, and then the reason I brought it up, well, one, when you said The Game, I thought of the 1997 movie with Michael Douglas. It's an excellent movie. I recently, recently saw TikTok reference it as one of the great mind-bending movies. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. It's currently on Netflix.
Isn't that the one where he's hunting humans?
That is not. No. I don't think Michael Douglas ever did that. Well, I don't know. I haven't seen that many of his movies.
I was just trying to remember specifically the premise of The Game, because I know I've seen it, but I know I saw it at a time where I also saw like The Hunted and The Island of Dr. Moreau, which I know was definitely one about being hunted.
We have to talk about The Island of Dr. Moreau sometime, even if it's not for a recording.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think Manhunter might be what you're thinking of, which is a prequel to Silence of the Lambs. It's an 80s movie.
Entirely plausible.
Okay. I haven't seen it, heard about it, but that's the only thing that comes to mind where they're hunting people. No, The Game is Michael Douglas plays a incredibly successful businessman who wants for nothing, and his brother is trying to give him an amazing birthday gift, and I don't want to really say any more. It's kind of like if I meet someone who hasn't seen The Usual Suspects, even though that movie is we're at 27 years, I'm not going to I will not spoil that movie because it's so good.
Yeah, that's fine. I know I've seen it, but it's been so long since I've seen it. Obviously, I don't remember the premise.
So does that ring a bell at all?
Vaguely. Like I'm kind of picturing part of it, but I'm going to have to go back and watch it.
It's one that, I just from how you've described the things that Emily likes, I think you guys could watch it together. There's nothing terrible in it. It's PG-13. It focuses on what the movie is supposed to focus. There's nothing gratuitous or like extra or, for the sake of, shock in it. And so it's a very good movie. Anyway, the other thing I was going to get at about that is that the notion of alpha males, the original scientist, or I don't know if it's behavior. I don't know if it was a behavioral scientist, but I want to say that it was scientists studying wolves. Came forward and said it was made up, like the idea of an alpha male or alpha female existing in nature specifically the animals they were studying does not exist, and I can link to an article that explains that.
Yeah, I'm curious about that one. Just because obviously we've incorporated this concept of what an alpha male would embody, and I think that we've made it manifest itself behaviorally over time, for sure. Now, I would expect that, like what you're getting at, is that this concept doesn't occur naturally.
Right. Yeah, at this point, it's become a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing.
Yeah, so I'm certainly interested in seeing that article as well.
The other, I guess it's a follow-up from episode 86 as the recording of this episode. The pro-life party that is, or the political party that claims to be pro-life has 219 members who declined to bring aid for the issue where baby formulas is difficult to come by in this country.
I really wish that didn't surprise me.
No. Didn't surprise me one single bit.
And it kind of, not directly, but it does sort of tie into the conversation for this evening, which I'm going to somewhat change as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that first bite.
And this is why I'm having trouble. So, as we record on the 24th of May, there was what can only be described as an absolutely horrific school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, I guess is how you pronounce it. I actually have no clue.
It works for me.
Yeah. And originally, the topic I had planned was born out of the fallout from the, was it Buffalo, the shooting? What, 10 days ago? Yeah. So there was an analysis done talking about extremism and violence that seems to be, and where it seems to be born of. There'll be some links in the show notes and all as well. But a lot of things that kind of interrelate and were interesting both from a political ideology perspective and just from what I would consider a uniquely American perspective, because we're the one country that has this specific problem on such an order of magnitude that it's difficult to comprehend. And ever since I saw the news about the shooting in Texas, like I haven't been able to focus necessarily. Just mentally, this is a really difficult one to digest, and all of them are. I don't want to take anything away from any other shooting. Loss of life is never something that's going to be easy to deal with or to wrap your head around. I think part of why this one has hit me in a specific way is that you're talking about an elementary school where, for all intents and purposes, the equivalent of a classroom was wiped out.
Yeah.
And I just don't have words for it.
I do. I mean, I really do.
I have a lot of words that I want to say, but I don't have a coherent thought around it. So I would certainly love to hear your take on it. But before we do, like I just real quick highlight one other piece, which is the following one. No, actually, so the second bite is that this marks the 27th shooting of 2022, or mass shooting of 2022.
Wow.
27 school shootings have taken place so far this year.
Wow.
And we're in May of 2022. We're 5 months into the year and have had 27 school shootings so far. And it's fucking absurd.
Yeah.
So now...
Do you want to mention that nice good bite before we get into this?
Let's mention the other piece. So there are a number of states that are having primary elections today as well. Alabama and Georgia both being among them. Unsurprisingly, Stacey Abrams will be winning the Democratic nomination for governor in Georgia. I didn't put a link into it. Part of why I watched Georgia is because of the current governor, Brian Kemp, having been an outspoken critic of Trump.
Right.
And he actually is also retaining the nomination for governor against the Trump-backed candidate, which
good.
is one of the few times that I actually am glad Georgians seem to be paying attention to something. How much of that is coming from Atlanta and maybe Athens versus everywhere else in the state is questionable. But hey,
it's a
good result.
It's a breeze. It's sometimes the breeze is the oncoming train, but maybe not this time.
Yeah. So I think either way, like even though I may not necessarily agree with many of Kemp's approaches to things, I would absolutely vote for an outspoken Republican against Trump as well. So I'm going to count Georgia as a win either way for governor.
I mean, if a candidate has an R next to his name, I don't automatically think bad, and if he has a D next to his name, I don't automatically think good. So, yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree there. My thing is that Stacey Abrams was, of course, influential in getting people motivated and out and active in voting in the last election, is the driving force behind Georgia having turned blue for a change.
Yeah.
I really think overall, from a voting rights perspective, it would be much better to have her take over the governorship role. But overall, whether it's her or Kemp, either one of them seem to be fairly level-headed, appropriate people for the office. And so I don't think it's necessarily a strong pull in either direction. I think depending on where you fall on specific issues, obviously you could pick one candidate very easily over the other. For me personally, it's more they exhibit leadership and embodiment of what the role should be and aren't bowing under pressure. And so I can respect either.
That's fair. Now if you could just get rid of Marjorie Taylor Greene.
I'm going to just not say anything there.
Yeah,
I have there is nothing positive that can come out of my mouth about her. And so I'm going to refrain for a change.
Yeah, and I'll just say this. It's not that, there are people that I know that, actually, I was gonna say might share some values with her, but I was like, I don't even think it's that. It's, she doesn't get it. And she's completely...
She lives in an entirely different reality than what truly exists.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really good way to phrase it. So back to the other topic about school shootings. I mean, before you use your words, can I just read a quick quote from something that Dan Rather wrote that I really kind of identified with? Yes.
I should have pulled it up and had it ready. So earlier, for those who don't know, Dan Rather does write on a Substack called Steady. And generally speaking, I think there are 2 newsletters a week, maybe 3. I don't remember for sure. And then often, if there's something important or breaking, there'll be an additional newsletter. And so today he wrote a quick item to send out. And there's one part of it that really resonated with my thought process on it and why I'm kind of having trouble with many aspects of it. And so I'm going to quote him. Quote, "This is senseless, and all who condone it, all who offer meaningless, quote-unquote, thoughts and prayers, all who say the answer is more guns and fewer restrictions, are complicit in the carnage." Now, certainly there was more written in the newsletter, but that summary kind of gets at the heart of his thoughts in the short piece that was written. And it's, I mean, I can't put it more eloquently from the standpoint of thoughts and prayers don't mean shit anymore. We are well beyond wishing you the best or thoughts and prayers or condolences having any effect after something as atrocious as this. And if that's still where you reside, you're a fucking moron. That's where I'm going to pause, because if not, I'm going to launch into just a rant full of expletives that nobody wants to, well, maybe a few want to listen to, but for the most part, people don't want to listen to. And since you do have some thoughts and something to say on the subject, maybe at this point I think it's a good idea for me to let you bring that in and see if it helps formulate a less expletive-ridden response from myself.
All right, I'll let it go so that you have a good edit point. So I've thought about this. I think the feeling that you're feeling, I felt 9 years ago. I can remember, the first, school mass shooting that comes to mind, like that I think about is the Columbine shooting in 1999. It happened like a month before I graduated from high school. Incidentally, my cousin graduated from Columbine High School just this week, so that's interesting. Anyway, I remember that shooting, and then I remember a few years after that working with somebody, and he was from Mississippi, and he was in school when a mass shooting about the size of Columbine occurred, but just didn't get the same publicity. Maybe because it was in Mississippi, I don't know. And, there have been shootings here and there, more here than there. A lot of them. They have been in schools, they have been in nightclubs, they have been in churches, they've been all over. And in 2012, when the first grade class at Sandy Hook, Connecticut, after that one happened, something sort of just snapped with me, or not snapped, but just I made the realization that we don't give a fuck about the kids. We don't give a fuck about life. We want our guns. There are those of us that want you to be afraid that some of us want to take your guns, and that makes you want to clench your guns more and buy more ammunition. We should start sending our children to school in riot gear, or put flak jackets, attached, build in a flak jacket with their backpacks, lock things down, So I've become desensitized to this because it's going to keep happening. This is going to be in a list of ones that we remember because of the media attention. And they're just going to keep happening because nobody's doing anything about it. And so I can remember I think it was the Orlando shooting. I was just like, oh, another shooting. Ho hum. Nobody is pro-life in this country. Wow.
So I would hesitate to say
nobody.
Absolute.
Absolutes
right.
are never correct.
but I do understand the sentiment when we're talking about both the pro-life subject and this subject, guns/shootings. It's really easy to take an absolutist viewpoint when you're surrounded by people who don't seem to get the view. Because the whole problem isn't necessarily gun ownership.
No, absolutely not.
And it's not necessarily advocating against a woman's right to choose, right? Like there are there are extremes to be made in any of these arguments. And I'm going to quit referencing the pro-life stuff just so that it doesn't get confusing. But specifically for guns, there is absolutely no reason, none whatsoever, that you can't make the act of purchasing and owning a gun more restrictive and have more oversight, and still allow people to enjoy whatever pastime and hobby they want with things that go boom. There's none. I am a gun owner. I am one of the few seemingly responsible gun owners. In a heartbeat, if I knew that not having them would mean that my kid was safe in school, you can fucking take them. Melt them down in front of me. I'm perfectly fine with it. Do I want to keep them? Sure. I enjoy them. I like shooting guns. Do I need them? No. And if the safety of kids, like just even if we just talk about school-age students, if their safety is reliant on removal of guns in their entirety from this country, I'm on board with it. I don't necessarily want to see that happen, but I will help make sure it happens if that's the case. But we're not even talking about that. Like that's the part that everybody wants to hone in on and focus on. That's the answer, and that's bullshit in and of itself.
What was the weapon that was used?
I believe that. So the article just mentioned a handgun and a rifle. It didn't say specifically what they were.
Okay. Because, it used to be the assault rifle was the red herring.
Right.
But, if we lived in a rational society, our first step to address this issue would be to study it, to collect data and find out what, commission a study on gun violence. But we can't do that. Not in the public sector. Our bought and paid for U.S. Congress won't allow it. So there's no federal monies that can be applied to understanding what the actual problem is, and it's a ridiculous approach to addressing the problem. So it's like we're not even allowing ourselves to address the problem.
And just to add to that, because I started down the extremist viewpoint, the whole thing that's being proposed when you're talking about regulating the firearm industry in general, no one is saying take away all the guns, melt them down, guns don't exist.
Right. Well,
whoever is so far extreme view, they're not being listened to. All of the arguments surround how easy it is to obtain a firearm, and the fact that there's no training that's required. There's not really, I know we quote unquote require a background check, but we don't really require a background check. I mean, it's minimal at best. There should be ongoing follow-ups for potential mental illness and other red flags that would lend someone who owns a weapon to be more likely to use it. And that's it. And if you can't get on board with being able to responsibly own a firearm and submit to a follow-up evaluation every few years at the same time you renew your license to carry said firearm, then you're not a responsible firearm owner. And if you think you are, you're full of shit, plain and simple. Because if you are more interested in you not having to do something to own a firearm than to ensure that everyone who owns a firearm is properly inclined to not use it against populations that should not have a firearm used against them, that disconnect just doesn't even register for me.
Probably one of the things that has swayed me or impacted my thoughts on firearms was something a friend of mine read on Facebook. I come from a place I've never fired a weapon before. I've disassembled and reassembled and and played with them like in that regard, but I've never fired any firearm. And there was a period of time where I was anti-firearm, like throw them away, burn, melt them down. But I have since backed off from that after reading this particular Facebook post, and it was so good. It was so good, so well informed, and I could, it's good enough. I could take the time to read it right now. It was a response to, I believe it was the Orlando shooting.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, it's quite long, but
that's all right.
Like I
because
said,
the other piece, like the part of like the other notes that I have, there is a political bend to this as well that I think it is well worth mentioning, but I don't want that to take the spotlight. Like at this point, firearms are a problem. Whether you want to believe it or not, firearms are a problem.
We don't know how much of a problem they are.
Right.
So this is a Facebook post written by my friend Steve Stroop. And he said, one problem with discussion like this, and this was a Facebook post in reference to some, comments, discussions after the Orlando shooting. I believe it was the Orlando shooting. One problem with the discussion like this is that gun control advocates are so often ill-informed about the technical and legislative aspects of this issue, that they make uninformed assertions and or fail to grasp the glaring fallacies inherent in so many anti-gun control arguments, such as the pace job from Mr. Miller above and arguments which conflate correlation and causation. Not referencing you, John, or anything you said here, just making generalization about pro-gun control advocates with whom I'm personally acquainted and many in the media. Pursuant to Mr. Miller's past, the NFA of 1934 was passed in the wake of the gangland violence largely associated with Prohibition. The short version is that fully automatic weapons, machine guns, sawed-off rifles, and shotguns and suppressors or silencers were restricted to a rigorous permitting process and a prohibitive, at the time, one-time quote-unquote transfer tax of $200, which dramatically curtailed ownership of these weapons among the general public. In 1968, the NFA was amended to also include, quote, any explosive, incendiary, or poison gas, A, bomb, B, grenade, C, rocket, having a propellant charge of more than 4 ounces, D, missiles, having an explosive charge of more than 1/4 ounce, E, mine, F, similar device, unquote, along with some other weaponry. Those who shrilly parrot gun law, quote-unquote, gun laws don't work because, quote-unquote, criminals don't obey laws are making a disingenuous assertion. We can all agree that no law will always stop every criminal terrorist from procuring illegal weapons, up to and including tactical nuclear weapons. But what criminals will and usually do is acquire the most potent firepower which is readily available and suited to their particular needs. Legal. This is why you don't often hear about mass murders, shootings, armed robberies, etc. being committed with fully automatic weapons, military ordnance such as claymore mines, grenades, RPGs, rockets, poison gas, or missiles, as they are heavily restricted to varying degrees, making them fairly difficult or virtually impossible to acquire. Most, if not all, semi-automatic centerfire rifles with high-capacity magazines used in recent mass shootings were legally acquired. Why were these types of rifles used? Because they represent the most potent firepower readily and legally available to the average citizen. Why didn't these shooters use fully automatic weapons, grenades, poison gas, etc., which would give them much greater destructive power and better defense against law enforcement officers? Shocker. Because they are, to a large degree, effectively banned. It's really that simple. The crux of this issue is how far firearm restrictions can go without violating the Second Amendment, and the only opinion which matters here is what the SCOTUS decides. Sorry, Facebook meme creators, a wannabe internet SCOTUS justice, restricting magazine capacities and restricting other features commonly found in military and military-type rifles have so far, anyway, withstood constitutional challenges on both the federal and state levels. As an aside, while most of the pro-gun control energy seems to be unfortunately expended on the so-called quote-unquote assault rifle, this type of weapon, while featured and demonized, is the most sensationalized shooting coverages is actually responsible for a tiny portion of all firearms fatalities in the U.S. Some words, man.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, the vast majority of firearm-related deaths are perpetrated by handguns.
Absolutely. So Steve compiled a list here. In 2013, there were 12,253 homicides in the U.S., broken down by weapon, 8,454 by handgun, 1,490 by knives, 687 by hands and feet, 428 by blunt objects, 308 by shotguns, 285 by rifles. And rifles includes all centerfire and rimfire rifles, not just those labeled as assault rifles. I like how hands and feet is number 3.
Yeah.
So the assault rifle is statistically a red herring, despite the impressive firepower and notoriety.
Yeah, realistically, it's not about owning the weapon. Like that's not going to make a difference. It's about the mental and emotional state of the person owning the weapon. Right.
Which we don't, we're not there yet. We're not in a place where we consider that. So this continues.
Oh, go ahead.
There are 2 primary obstacles standing in the way of sensible firearms regulations. The NRA is in its most extreme incarnation to date, and the Congress it owns lock, stock, and barrel. Much of their income is derived from firearm industry manufacturers, and the remainder is generated by membership fees from a constituency which has been sustained for decades by an artificially generated impending fear of loss. It's an extremely profitable and powerful business model, so much so that when tragedies with firearms occur, the glib response from the NRA's bought and paid for politicians is usually something along the lines of quote-unquote thoughts and prayers, a shoulder shrug, and some mumbled platitudes about mental illness or video games. 2. The American gun culture generally. Firearms constitute a security system on several levels and offer perceived protection from fears, both real and imagined. It helps to look at it like a religion because there are a number of close parallels. Like the most fear-based security systems, it's normally not amenable to rational discussion, especially among its fundamentalist wing, which sees any attempt at sensible regulation as apostasy from the true faith. Since regulation usually means corresponding reduction in firearms and accessory sales, the NRA fights it tooth and nail, even vigorously opposing sensible measures it once supported. Sensing victory and intoxicated with the power of controlling all 3 branches of government, the firearms industry has doubled down, and there's actually a bill in Congress euphemistically titled Hearing Protection Act, which will remove firearm suppressors, incorrectly called silencers, out of their now tightly regulated federal Class 3 category and make them as easy to buy as purchasing a shotgun at Walmart. It now takes months of waiting, a $200 transfer tax, lots of paperwork and approval from local, state, and federal governments in order to become approved for the ownership. Additionally, since they're such a specialty item, costs are rather high. If the HPA becomes law, the suppressors will drop in price, and anyone who wants one will have easy access to however many they want. Just imagine how much more carnage could be wrought by a mass shooter who's using an effective suppressor, where potential victims wouldn't be alerted to the danger by the sound of gunshots. If you really want to get a handle on this rather bizarre American phenomenon, put a T-shirt with a Culpeper flag. Put on a T-shirt with a Culpeper flag and go to one of the gun shows at the BJCC and wander around talking to folks. It'll be a real eye-opener. There's more, but we can talk.
Yeah, what's the Culpeper flag?
Yeah, I couldn't remember, and so I was going to look that up, actually.
I hadn't heard that before.
It's the Don't Tread on Me. The Don't Tread on Me snake.
Gotcha. So the, Texas flag? Not the state flag, but the one that you typically see in Texas.
Yes. And, speaking of Texas, if you know how they talk about, we just need, arm the teachers. Like if they can't protect the kids in Texas, it's not going to happen anywhere.
Yeah, fair enough argument. I did see, speaking along those same lines, like I've seen a couple of people also post on social media talking about, I think the origin of a couple of these reposts are teachers who are saying they're willing to be armed to, assist in defending against this type of situation. That is not at all an appropriate response. Let's just be clear. Like, arming more people is not going to help the situation.
No, it's not.
The thing that most people don't want to accept, and it's very clear if you go back to the evolution of SWAT teams and how militarized the police have become. The more firepower you have to combat those people who are wanting to perpetrate a crime, the greater the firepower those people wanting to perpetrate the crime are going to acquire in order to be successful. Arming teachers only escalates. That's it. That's the only possible outcome. It can sound attractive in the short term, but that's not how this works. Those people who seek to perpetrate violence against others are going to attempt to do so. If you escalate the perceived defenses against that response, those who seek to perpetrate violence are going to escalate the response. Simple enough. I mean, we see this everywhere. You see it in war, you see it in the criminal justice system, you see it throughout history. This is nothing new. The answer, very rightly, is actually taking a moment to focus on the mental and emotional health of people.
I mean, it's
the core fundamental area that this country wants to ignore and has wanted to ignore for as long as it has existed.
Yeah.
I mean, we're close to wanting to ignore physical health for all intents and purposes. Why would we care about anything beyond that?
I was just going to say we're still working on physical health. And many thanks to the mental health professionals out there and the folks that are promoting mental well-being and seeking out help from mental health professionals. Good on all of those folks. You want to hear the old grandpa version of what is gonna what's going on right now, and that is there's some medicine and you gotta take it. So this Facebook post that I was reading from, there's some more, and I'm gonna move on to a different part of it, but there's a few other things I wanted to pick out from it, and I think it gets into what we're just now talking about, and it talks about the folks in favor of sensible controls need to do some work on the facts underlying their positions too. Let's face it, many of the moderate and left side of the aisle don't really know much about firearms and simply regurgitate talking points from favorite media outlets, rather than utilizing primary sources and educating themselves on the technical issues underlying any possible solution. The problem comes that when these errors are pointed out by the opposition, it's too easy to dismiss everything else as the product of someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, and that's a difficult position from which to advocate. One of the biggest red herrings is the furor over so-called assault rifles, exemplified by the sinister-looking AR-15 and its clones, which are fetishized by the right and demonized by the left, and have become a focal point for proposed regulations. The danger posed to mass gatherings by semiotic center-fire rifles with high-capacity magazines can be largely mitigated by limiting magazine capacity to no more than 5 rounds or even 3. Magazine changes leave a shooter vulnerable and open a window of opportunity for potential victims. Gabby Giffords is likely alive today because, Gabby Giffords is likely alive today along with possibly others because one of her staff successfully jumped the gunman during a magazine change. High-capacity magazines for the AR-15 family are usually in the 30 and 40-round capacity, with 100-round drum magazines available as well, for less than $100. High-capacity magazines, as we know them today, originated in Vietnam when our soldiers were at a disadvantage due to the Viet Cong and NVA possessing 30-round clips for their AK-47s as opposed to our 20-round clips for the M16, the granddaddy of the AR family, both military and civilian. The military's response was to manufacture 30-round clips, quickly dubbed the Jungle Clip, and the American high-capacity magazine was born. These are indisputably dangerously effective weapons by design and have figured prominent in a number of mass shootings, but statistically, they're not the problem. And as long as the focus remains on this quote-unquote celebrity gun, the real problem firearm continues to slide by virtually unnoticed: handguns. A good place to start at a technical portion of the problem is by reviewing the Justice Department stats on homicides by weapon, just to place everything in perspective. Another angle of attack is to allow science to study the problem and to make dispassionate recommendations based on data rather than partisanship or emotion. The NRA's bought and paid for Congress has prohibited by defunding the CDC from studying firearms violence, most likely because they have some idea what the results will be. We need them back on the job, sufficiently funded to study this problem in depth and to offer a sound recommendation. And remember, all firearm owners aren't wild-eyed, my cold dead hands, Ted Nugent-loving NRA fanatics. Some of us cherish our Second Amendment freedoms, are firearm enthusiasts and or collectors, but realize that the easy access to firearms and the dangerous firepower readily accessible to almost everyone now is exacting a high price which some of us really don't want to pay.
So I like that as an ending, but I'm going to not let that be the ending. There are a couple of times that you've used, and I know it was reading, the phrase, the bought and paid for Congress.
Yeah.
And I want to latch onto that briefly because it feeds into the other topic that I had earmarked, which was that extremism in general is now highly disproportionate between political ideologies as well, which in an environment where political ideology can drive a person to action far more easily than it maybe could have in the past, or at a minimum is more divisive than it ever has been in the past, makes it I'm going to call it a dangerous situation. And the main reason is because the shooting in Buffalo was obviously motivated by a combination of political ideology and racism. While it's still unknown about, at least as of the time that we're recording, about the motivations behind the shooting in Texas, it's not a far cry to think that some of these things are interrelated. So there are a couple of things that I just want to mention, just pure factual perspective, that like over the past decade, there have been about 450 murders specifically committed by political extremists. And 10 years, 450, just reiterate that for the sake of understanding. If you're only picking out political extremism as a motive, that's a pretty high number.
That's almost the number of people we lost in 9/11.
Yeah. So of those 450, right-wing extremists committed about 75%. Islamic extremists were responsible for about 20%. Less than 5% were left-wing extremists. And I want to repeat that because this is where you start to truly see the acceptance of violent rhetoric actually having a quantifiable element. 450 murders over a decade that were committed by political extremists. 75% were committed by right-wing extremists. About 20% Islamic, which is who the American general population loves to blame as the huge group committing these, but that's false.
Another red herring.
Exactly, and less than 5% left-wing. Nearly half were tied to white supremacists. Starting to get a pretty clear picture of what the fuck is wrong. And then we're only talking about political, specifically murders tied to political extremists. Like, we're not even getting into the overall murder rate with correlations to political ideology yet. And I just want to make that clear. The pattern extends to violence less severe than murder. This is where it starts to get scary if you're paying attention, dear listener. For example, the January 6th attack on Congress also extends to, or this mentality in general also extends to language from certain politicians. A much larger number of officials don't use violent language, but also don't denounce it or punish those who do, out of a general fear of reprisal. And what that translates to is that there's often fairly significant overlap between the violent threats or quote-unquote fear of reprisal and white supremacist beliefs. If you remember, nearly half of the 450 politically charged murders were tied to white supremacy. There's a pretty fundamental problem here. There is a significant group of people who hold generally racist beliefs and ideologies, specifically white supremacist beliefs and ideologies, that are committing acts of violence against others seemingly at will and accounting for more than 50% of those acts. Let's extrapolate that slightly further and think about like the Buffalo shooting that was also tied to someone who very clearly held white supremacist beliefs. This is well documented. If you don't believe it, go read the actual reports. If we continue to have leadership in this country not condemn violent rhetoric, not hold people accountable for those instances of repeating what could be considered white supremacist beliefs or rhetoric, or even just seemingly antagonistic with a violent bent to it verbiage, we've got a problem. It's not at all difficult to see that when we are continually exposed to our leadership, like them or not, the United States government leadership engaging in calls to violence or other violent related rhetoric and not absolutely shaming those people who resort to such levels, it trickles down. Plenty of people think violence is the answer. January 6th was a perfect example where if you believed that the only action for the sake of saving an election was to engage in a violent act, it was practically sanctioned. How difficult is it to believe that you see this play out on the national stage and think that the answer to a perceived slight in day-to-day activities is to shoot someone?
It's interesting.
It's exactly what happened in Buffalo.
Yeah.
It's exactly what happens in road rage shootings. I'm willing to bet there's a similar motive in Texas. 99% of the time, someone feels slighted or undermined or belittled, and they go and act in such a way as to take another person's life because it makes them feel powerful in the moment. And far too often, these people are people that we could have detected having such red flags if we just paid attention.
I think it's in the culture.
It's definitely in the culture.
I think it's deep in the culture. I've had thoughts about how the majority of Americans are comprised of immigrants who came over to this country. I was taught, religious freedoms, but that's not exactly the only reasons. They're the ones that couldn't get along with the Europeans. The folks back in the old world. Those are the ones who came over here. And for whatever reason that they came over here, they couldn't get along. And what did we do? We said, hey, we're chosen, we're God's chosen people. And we took the indigenous people and said, hey, you should be our, you need to, come to Jesus or we're going to kill you. And that's what they did. They killed most of the indigenous people here. And then we were like, oh, well, we need people to work over here. So let's go get these other people who don't look like us and bring them over here and rip them from their homelands. So we have a history of violence and a history of white supremacy. It is the culture. Not just in the culture, it is the culture.
Yeah, I would say that it illuminates the core thing that we've reiterated over and over and over. Far too many people have no clue what it means to be a decent human being. They really don't. They adhere to some variant of what's been taught over time, either religious or, if not religious, deeply rooted in particular societal structures that regardless of which path you choose or really kind of latch onto, it's still rooted in a fundamental problem. And that fundamental problem is that we're not treating each other as human beings. At the end of the day, you have people who view themselves as superior to others. Quite frankly, that is completely falsified, a horrifically self-delusional mental model that there's no way forward until we recognize no human is superior or inferior to another human. None. And if you look at anyone and pass judgment on them for being less of a person than you are, you're a problem. And unfortunately, the United States was built on a foundation of looking at others as inferior. And so for better or worse, this is a problem that we will have to tackle until it is completely obliterated from our day-to-day interactions. And we're just not there. And we're not even close to being there.
We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.